As of November 5th, 2024, it's confirmed that President Donald J. Trump will lead a second term in office. While many, for better or worse, are still adjusting to this new reality, one question looms large. What could his future policies mean for the economy of the Dominican Republic and the broader Caribbean and Latin American region as a whole? In this video, I plan to answer this question. While I have my own opinions on what his presidency means for the future of America and the world, the fact I'm Canadian may mean that I have a more balanced or less biased outlook. Either way, I'll give you my best objective, non-politicized outlook on the matter. Hey everyone, it's Brian P. from Linkzup DR. We're here to give you the juicy insights on entrepreneurship, property investment, and just living that freedom lifestyle in the beautiful and always gorgeous and lovely Dominican Republic. We're a real estate investment, property management, and tour company based in Sosua, Dominican Republic. So, what happened? We got ahead of the curve, the post-pandemic years when other American markets began to shift, and we pivoted before the shift occurred. So now, before we dive in any further to this video, I would like to give you a disclaimer. While I have a law degree and a major in political science, I'm no geopolitical expert. As a matter of fact, I can't stand math. I'd rather pay someone to do my taxes for that matter.
God damn!
I'm just a guy with boots on the ground, his ears on the sky, and eyes scanning the web for publicly available information. So, now that's out of the way, without further ado, let's jump in. Here's my overall take. While the political landscape may shift dramatically, the implications for the US and Latin American relations and economic trends will likely play out in real time. What's good and unique about his presidency is that we have 4 years of President Donald Trump's first term to navigate and estimate on how his economic policies may unfold over the next 4 years. So in this video, we look at 4 key policy decisions which may determine the future economic growth of the Dominican Republic and Latin America as a whole. So firstly, we're going to look at whether U.S. national security and economic growth framework is a positive for the Caribbean and Latin America. On February 4th, 2020, U.S. President Donald Trump gave his final State of the Union address, where he delivered the most Americas-centric address of any modern-day presidency. Those remarks stand in stark contrast to President Joe Biden, whose most recent and perhaps final State of the Union address in 2024 did not contain a single direct reference to Latin America and the Caribbean. The core of President Trump's approach to Latin America and the Caribbean was the strong link between the U.S. national security and mutual economic growth with the Caribbean. In December 2019, he approved basically a whole of government initiative called the CREASE Initiative, aka Growth in the Americas, which focused on the design and implementation of an energy and infrastructure and investment framework which would identify new markets and create a tangible pipeline of deals and harness private capital from the US, weaning countries from their dependence on overseas companies and Chinese state-owned entities. 1 year later, nearly half of those countries in the region had signed the America-Korea Investment Framework, while the last Belt and Road Agreement with China was signed in 2019. So for the first time in a decade, the US boxed China out of the region by a score of 15-0, not including 2 fully negotiated frameworks that were left with signature ready and identified as nearly $174 billion in possible investment opportunities. If President Trump decided to revive this agenda, his economic policy could reinvigorate these efforts, driving the growth of the US and its regional partners. Given the ongoing geopolitical shifts, such as the US reclaiming influence from China, we can expect to see similar policies that focus on securing mutual economic growth, trade agreements, energy infrastructure, and initiatives in the Caribbean and Latin Americas. We'll now look at whether the U.S. is a blessing or a burden for the Dominican Republic with a strong dollar. A critical aspect of Donald Trump's administration's economic legacy will be its impact on the U.S.'s strength of the dollar. So, over the past few years, the U.S. dollar has gone through a period of instability with high inflation brought on by high government spending and a rising challenge on the dollar's hegemonic dominance coming from the BRICS nations. So the dollar has still remained a powerful global force, and also in Latin America economies, including the Dominican Republic, which has benefited from a strong dollar, particularly in terms of trade and remittances. But what would a stronger dollar mean for the Dominican Republic, which uses the US dollar as a key currency in its financial system? Yuri Dadush, senior fellow at OCP Policy Center and non-resident scholar at Burgo, believes that, viewed in isolation, a stronger dollar is good for Latin America and the Caribbean exporters and families that receive payments, but it could, however, be a burdensome for foreign consumers as well as governments and companies with larger unhinged debts, dollar debts. However, it should be noted that this net effect varies across countries. So countries with more exports and imports, such as Mexico, will be in a better shape based on their return. As of 2022, the Dominican Republic has exported $13.5 billion to the US and imported $17 billion from the US, particularly petroleum. So what does that mean? This means that the Dominican Republic has a deficit of $3.4 billion from the US. However, this is still a very healthy economic exchange from both nations. Therefore, economies that allow their exchange rate to float and that have modest amounts of unhinged dollar debt are the least affected by the high dollar rate. So, the US economy is recovering from the numerous geopolitical situations at home and abroad that have erupted over the past 4 years. However, immediately the morning after Mr. Trump won the presidential election this week, the US markets did surge. By the market's close, Dow Jones Industrial gained over 1,500 points and the S&P 500 2.5% higher on that day. Alan Small, senior investment advisor of the financial group AI Private Wealth, explained that the surge is tied to hopes that the victorious Republican candidate will enact a deregulation agenda when he takes office. If Trump's administration successfully improves growth, it would be because it was able to jumpstart investment amid a stable or stronger dollar. The robust US dollar would thus be based on strengthening investment and growth, which would eventually strengthen Latin American countries as the US dollar for commodities and imports of goods and services would rise. The countries that would benefit the most are the ones that can attract the most capital inflows, especially if inflows strengthen private investment. The Dominican Republic is one of the countries that stands to benefit the most from a stronger US dollar and improved investment prospects. However, as the US dollar strengthens, some countries will also have sharp risk of recession. These will be the ones that have the least currency adjustment, such as Ecuador or Venezuela, which will see weaker growth in unemployment. With an average GDP growth of 4.9% per year over the past 50 years, the Dominican Republic is the Latin American country whose economics has advanced the fastest. From being one of the poorest, its standard of living on average is already 1/3 that of the United States. And if the right policies are remained, it could become an advanced economy by mid-century. So, what could a Trump presidency mean for interest rates and lending in Dominican Republic? Let's talk about interest rates and how further rate declines could also mean increased lending opportunities for investors in the Dominican Republic. Lower interest rates in the US could make it easier for Dominican Republic businesses to access more capital at a more affordable rate, driving investment in infrastructure and development and expansion. However, the impact of interest rates cuts will depend on how well the Dominican Republic can align its economic policies with that of the United States economic trends. As of the publishing of this video in November 2024, the US Central Bank has cut interest rates for the second time in a row as the independent agency's future becomes uncertain under a second Donald Trump presidency. This week, the Federal Reserve has brought rates down from 4.75% to 4.5%. The US interest rate is arranged to guide lenders rather than a single percentage. The quarter-point move comes as the United States economy faces a new direction and a new president. Many of the mainstream US outlets have written that President Trump's impending return to the White House appears to put the Federal Reserve on a slower and shallower path for interest rate cuts. with a slew of new policies poised to juice the economy and stall or reverse the slowdown of inflation. While the executive branch does not officially have decision-making ability over the Fed, Trump, on the other hand, has promised increased rates would go down under his presidency. The Dominican Republic government will need to pay close attention to this, mainly because much of the economic policy that comes from the United States directly affects the Dominican Republic's economy because of its close proximity, trade relations, and reliance on the US dollar. Will President Donald Trump's promise to end global conflicts also have the potential to stabilize oil prices in the Caribbean and Latin America? Throughout the 2024 presidential campaign, President Trump has proclaimed his willingness and ability to be able to end the war in Russia against Ukraine within 24 hours of taking office, bringing peace to the Middle East, and exerting dominance over China, one of the US's greatest geopolitical rivals. While the Dominican Republic's economy has picked up significantly in 2024, the country's dependence on imported oil exposes consumer prices to swings in international oil prices. There's one thing that's always bad for business when it comes to increased oil prices, and that's war, particularly the ongoing wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. If President Trump can pull through on his promises, this will affect the Dominican Republic's economy directly by stabilizing oil markets and thus creating more regularity and, by default, increased economic growth. So, in summary, the question we have to ask is President Trump's presidency a boost for the Dominican Republic? Here's my take on the future growth of the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic has one of the most stable economies in Latin America, with an average GDP growth rate of 4.9% per year over the past 50 years. It has also gone through a century transformation, going from one of the world's economies with one of the worst economies, similar to that of its neighboring country Haiti, which shares the island of Hispaniola with the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic's standard of living is already 1/3 of that of the United States, and if the right policies are maintained, it could become an advanced economy by mid-century. Therefore, could a second term under Donald Trump propel the Dominican Republic into a new era of growth? If Trump's policies align with his promises of deregulation, stronger US-Latin American ties, and a stable economic growth, the Dominican Republic may see significant benefits, particularly through increased investment, a stronger dollar, and more stable geopolitical landscape. Who knows, the election of President Donald Trump might just be the biggest boost to the Dominican Republic's economy in the past century. However, one thing is clear. With its impressive economic trajectory, the Dominican Republic could be one of the biggest winners in the next chapter of US-Latin American relations. But let's slow down and let's not put the cart before the horse, as he still needs to take office, select his cabinet, and release his economic and foreign policies. So for now, we'll play it by ear and we'll see how it goes. Lastly, if you took anything from this video, now is the perfect time to start your investment journey in the Caribbean's fastest growing market. Prices are still low and the potential for growth increases as demand rises. So don't miss your chance to own your slice of paradise. If you have any questions or are thinking about investing, drop them in the comment section and I'll definitely do my best to answer or point you in the right direction if I don't have an answer. And if you found this video helpful and you want to see more business entrepreneurship, property investment, and living that dream lifestyle in the beautiful and always gorgeous Dominican Republic, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like, and I will see you in the next one.